You're listening to the Iron and Grace podcast, so pick up your sword and join the good fight.
Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Immanuel. What's up, buddy?
What's up?
This is Kyle.
This is Drew.
Welcome to Iron and Grace. That's Isaiah 7:14.
We are fully into the Christmas season.
Yay.
I think this episode will come out if we do it on Wednesday. If you're listening to it on Wednesday, it will be
Christmas Eve.
Yeah, Christmas Eve. So I think that is appropriate for what we are going to talk about. This is more, I think, maybe my topic. Not as much I hate to say my topic, but one that I had up because it is a pet peeve of mine, the Santa. What?
The Santa.
The Santa. Exactly. But that's what it is. Like, it is the Santa. Like, what? So I get in arguments at work, like, a lot about this topic. I like having conversation with people at work.
So I'm guessing that you're not going to the mall and sitting on Santa's lap?
No, absolutely not. Okay. I feel like Santa this may be like a bold statement, but it may be like one of the biggest, I say lie, because it is deception. I think it's really harmful for the younger generation. I think it was harmful in my life coming from a family that did Santa. I don't think anybody's necessarily, it's not like morally wrong that you chose to do the Santa thing.
Right.
But I think it's much more harmful than people give it credit for. And I think they are wrong for doing it. And I hope maybe through this dialogue that we have now, maybe people can change their mind too, like I have.
They'll at least give us mean comments on the internet.
That's fun. This one may get a lot of mean comments.
That's fun too.
But we're not alone, because when I was doing a little research, like, okay, what other people think? Because it's something that I came to a conclusion on kind of on my own. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, I wonder if other people think this too. And there are a lot of other people. So watching videos, there is people that agree with me. There's people that are like, it's no big deal. There's people that like are way towards the other side. Like, you know, it's fantasy play. Kids need fantasy play. It's not a big deal, but I think it is a big deal. Yeah.
So I'll tell you where we are in our family, and then I'm just going to let you do your thing because you've got a lot more here than I do. We don't do Santa Claus in my house. Mm-hmm. We did for a short time when Rose was little and maybe when Elizabeth was little too. We did Santa, my childhood. Jerry Lynn did Santa her childhood. But we kind of decided we don't want them to believe this thing that we know to be a lie. Just for them to at some point realize, oh, mom and dad were lying about that.
Yeah.
We don't lie to our kids in general, period. We try not to lie to them about anything. And we're like, hey, this is one of those things. Christmas is supposed to be about the birth of Jesus.
Absolutely.
So if it's about what Santa Claus is going to bring you, then it's not about the birth of Jesus. And we don't have a lot of money. So, like, hey, if you're expecting the imaginary guy to bring a bunch of crap down the chimney for you, I'm that imaginary guy, and I don't have the money to buy you all that crap. So we're not doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess for me, I'll just kind of unpack my position, and then we can kind of expand from there. But I think some of the positions that I saw online were like, well, you're not really lying to your kid. I understand that position. I understand that, okay, it's not like someone's like lying in that sense. But I mean, in my opinion, that you're lying to your children, because the Santa thing, as we see it culturally, currently in the world we live in the time we live in, think of the depth that it goes in a kid's life, right? Kids don't have the same level of intellect and maturity and wisdom that adults do.
Yeah. Yeah, don't church it up. It's a lie. I mean, it
is. It is.
Is it a life altering lie? Maybe not. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not a big deal. And I think in a lot of cases, it's not a big deal. The weight you put behind it, I think has something to do with it for sure.
I think it is a bigger deal than we give it weight. We don't give it the weight that I think when you unpack it, it really should be given. So if we look at it, right, your kids. Let's just say you're a single family. You're not a single family. You have one child, and you're doing the Santa thing, kind of like you talked about. Mm-hmm. Your kid's going to grow up, right, believing that Santa Claus comes on Christmas. And this has no bearing on the Christian side. This is, plenty of Christians are devout Christians and still celebrate, with Santa. they grow up thinking, okay, Santa comes. I write letters to Santa. I get tons of gifts on Christmas morning from Santa. And it's look at the depth that we go to continue the lie of Santa Claus, right? It's not just like this mythical thing or like, don't go out in the woods in the backyard at night because, there's Bigfoot out there and kids think it's real and you kind of play into it to keep them from going in the woods, right? It's bigger than that. We take people to the mall, take kids to the mall. They sit on a physical person that's dressed like Santa Claus.
Some strange dude that you can't even see his face.
And that's a whole nother thing. But think about in a kid's mind how real the Santa figure is in their world. It's not just something you told them. It's something that they live, they experience, they feel, they touch, they write to, they talk to. I mean, when they're going to the mall, they think that's Santa Claus. They're seeing a physical person that's real to them. He's in, and as technology has advanced, we get phone calls from Santa. People do that. They do emails back and forth from Santa. We get letters from Santa.
Some news stations do the sleigh tracker thing, the Christmas sleigh tracker. I don't know if they still do that, but I think they used to.
Think about the depth of deception that we go to. And I think that speaks to what's the motive behind it. Okay. I was listening to one and they were saying that, it's joyful, right? It's still a positive thing. He's a positive figure that helps kids, brings them gifts. He's joyful, he's whatever, and it's a positive thing. But that doesn't get past the point that the whole concept, you're deceiving your child who looks to you as a trusted source, as a wise source, as a protector, and someone that keeps them safe. And it's not just, I was talking with somebody at work and they were like, we're talking about lying to children, right? My opinion, you should never lie to your kids. Whether certain things are lies or not, okay, we can have that debate. Mm-hmm. But she used the example of like the kids nagging her to have some of her smoothie, right? And it's like, you can just be like, stop. But eventually you're like, oh, she's really harping on me. So she says, it's nasty. You're not going to like it, right? And then the kid might believe him. Like, okay, it's not good. I don't want it, right? And that's you're lying because it is good, right? But
until you make the kid a smoothie and you want him to drink it, 2 hours later you find it in the cup still full.
That was my
Why
position.
didn't she drink it?
Yeah, that was my...
You said it was nasty. Mine was nasty. Yours isn't nasty.
That was my position.
Well, and, time out, because being a parent is complicated. And to say always and never lie to your kids, never tell your kid that your smoothie's nasty because you don't want them to drink it. Hey, man, as a very guilty party, like sometimes it's not quite that easy.
Yeah.
But spending years and years and years and years and years continually teaching your kid that, there's a big fat guy that's going to come down the chimney and bring you presents. Yeah.
And that's like that's my point. It's not a small lie or deception to try to, mitigate the current situation. It's ongoing for years. I mean, when I was a kid, my parents did the Santa thing. And I guess I was like 8 or 9 when I found out. So think about kids that are growing up their entire life believing that this person exists, is real, has a physical being, has a physical place. There's elves, there's other people. Think about the scale that it goes to. It's not just like a fairy tale or a folklore or a movie they watch. It completely embodies. They do things at school for it. Like you said, they go to the mall, and the mall's just not like Santa you see in the parade. Like it's a whole experience, right? Like it's a whole thing. And I think we know that all that's fake as adults. Kids don't perceive things the same way. They're in their brain, Santa's real. So what does that look like now when they find out that he's not?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't remember how we told our kids, because they were pretty young, and we're like, no, we don't want to do this. And then after that, it was like trying to keep them from telling every other kid that they knew, hey, that thing you're believing is wrong. What do you believe in Santa Claus? Come on. I'm like, well, don't. That's for their parents to make that decision, not you.
Which is like a whole nother thing that like, I get you don't have to just like blast your beliefs in every interaction. But then you're like, your kid's like in a position, like, I don't like that either, because now, like, that's one thing I've experienced, like, as an adult too, you're like, you've got to like watch, like, I don't think the Santa thing is good. I think it's harmful in the long run for kids.
Drew's sneaking around to the kids in the mall whispering in their ear, Santa Claus isn't real.
Like, you know, but now I got to hold my tongue and not, like, I got signs, you know, like, Dad, why is he, that's what? I mean, that's my point. I mean, the kid's going to be traumatized, but, yeah, like, now I got to hold my tongue and like be careful around what I say.
I'm going to get you a Grinch costume.
You should be. I'm stealing Christmas back. We're stealing Christmas back. That's my point. But you look at, I mean, when I remember specifically remembering when I realized that, well, I guess I didn't realize Santa wasn't real. I was just, the level of confusion was like the next level. I remember, I remember where we were coming from, but I had asked for like a big gift. It was like one of those roller coasters that was like Lego, but it wasn't Lego. It was like the little, like, pieces that got put together. Okay. They were like track pieces.
Oh, and it had like the little cart thing that you rode on it.
No, it wasn't like you rode. It was big, but it wasn't like, it was still like a small, like you had a little cart that you pushed and stuff. Okay. But it was like a replica of a roller coaster or whatever. And I remember asking for it, and that was like my big gift. And I remember I got in like the van or the SUV, and I remember looking over the back seat and seeing it and being like, hold up. Wait a second. Is Mom delivering gifts for Santa now? Like, what's happening here? But I also remember really like getting back in the seat and being really shook, like morally, because it's like, as a little kid, you're trying to learn about the world, right? And you're trying to figure out things, who you can trust, who you can't. And now you have this. And at that point, I'm sitting in the seat and I'm thinking, okay, that's my gift. So there's a couple options here. She's delivering gifts for Santa. Santa already brought it. What, you know, I'm like 8, 9 years old. I'm not like an adult that can be like, make good decisions. And now I'm like, well, I don't want to ask Mom, because like, she's involved. This is her car. She came with the gift. Like, what?
She's
like,
conspiring.
Yeah. So now you're going on. And I remember going on and for years after, like, not really knowing whether what like in this like confusion, right? And you're like, well, they haven't told me, you know. I mean, some little kids, like, I wasn't that kid that was just gonna come out there and ask. Like Deanna, my wife, she would have been like, yo, what is?
Yeah.
I put this on my Christmas list. Are you lying to me?
Yeah.
And then at that point, you gotta.
Mavis would be like, call on your bluff, bro. Santa's not real, is he? Like, stop interrogating me, 9-year-old. Now 10-year-old.
And that's a good place to go if you want to take the notion that it's not a lie, right? That it's not really a lie, it's a deception, it's fantasy play. If they ask you, what do you say? Because at that point, now you're actively lying to them. You're not just playing a game and they're believing it and stuff. They're asking you a legitimate question from a place of understanding. They're trying to they've come to that, like, there's some reason that they're asking you that. And now you've got to make a conscious decision. Okay, I'm going to continue the lie, or I'm going to end this, right? And that, I think, in my opinion, if you're in that position, you should just come out and tell them, like, yeah, it's not real. Here are the reasons, right? But I wouldn't think that most people do that.
I am definitely not as hard on this topic as you are. It bothers me a lot less than it bothers you. But I think it's more like, what, as the parent, what makes you decide to go with the Santa thing? It's okay, it's tradition. This is what I grew up with. I had a lot of fun doing it. My parents had a lot of fun playing Santa, or, you know, whatever. We enjoy doing it in our house. We still have the meaning of Christmas as the meaning of Christmas. Okay. But you know, and I know a lot of families and have a lot of friends that's what they do. And I don't really think it's a terrible thing until it causes anxiety in the parents, because you got to come up with something to get that's from Santa. You got to hide it. You got to do all the things. The kid, you know, what level of idol is the Santa figure in the kid's life? Is this just a fun thing that we do and we kind of play around with? And if the kid, you know, asks you, is Santa really real? You go, well, no, you know, we just have fun with it, you know, and you're honest with your kid. You know, I don't think it's a terrible thing. I don't feel strongly enough about it to go, that's morally wrong. But, and maybe the but carries a lot of weight. Maybe the but carries a little bit of weight, but the real meaning of Christmas is the birth of Christ. Something that a good portion of our society says didn't happen, or Jesus wasn't real, or he was just a guy. There's a lot of, well, that's not true, that's not true, that's not true, coming from the world. Well, but we do believe that to be true. We know it to be true, and we want to make sure that our children, it's up to us to teach them what we can, raise them in the ways of the Lord so that they won't depart. Do I hold the responsibility of deciding whether or not their heart is going to accept Christ? No. That's going to be their decision. That's between them and the Holy Spirit. It's my job to till the ground, to raise them up in a way where they see good examples of me living in the faith, my wife living in the faith, the people around me. I want as much evidence on my side of this is truly what I believe. This thing that I've been telling you since you were born, I believe with all my heart. Now, if one of the things that I've been telling you since you were born turns out to be not just incorrect, but a lie that I knew, obviously, I'm an adult. I knew there's no Santa Claus, so I've been actively trying to make you believe this. Okay, now it leaves room, at least a teeny bit of room to go, okay, well, what else is just make believe to you? And I do think there's a place for imagination and fairy tale and play and storytelling. That is super important. Like, I have very creative kids with very active imaginations. One of them had an imaginary friend for a little while. Rose wanted to be an otter when she was 3 years old. That's part of being a kid and raising kids is having all those things. But we also have to make sure that the important things stay the important things, and that we don't put something in the way, like intentionally in the way as a stumbling block to those important things. And Christmas as a whole, in the United States, I'm sorry, Christmas is not about the birth of Jesus.
No, Santa's completely
It's about
taken over.
selling a whole bunch of stuff and making a whole lot of money.
And
Santa's just a marketing tool to do that.
yeah, they've used and I think we can maybe unpack some of the history too there of what it is. But they've definitely commercialized Santa as a figurehead. And I don't want people to think that like you can't have a sound Christian household and still do the Santa lie, using hyperbolic language there, calling it a lie. You can still do that and have that and still have
It's time for Drew to get some mean comments on the internet. It seems like all the angry comments are at me.
They have been kind of
so like
towards you.
give some towards Drew. Drew gets angry comments this time.
This one probably will give me some angry comments. Hopefully, that's the goal, right? I want as many people to see this. That's the goal of the podcast. So hopefully, but and I want to hear that's one thing. Like if you have an angry comment, like go ahead. Like I hate for like just trolling, but like if you have a position, like put it out there and like let's engage with it. But
don't hurt my feelings.
Yeah, but I think now I've babbled about Santa being a lie, and I want to unpack maybe some of the you unpacked one of the very good reasons of why I think it is harmful. For me, I don't remember. I grew up in a church environment at an early age. Our family kind of stopped going to church. I can't say that the impact of realizing Santa wasn't real in my life led me to draw the conclusion that, okay, Christ isn't real either, because I don't remember that. I definitely remember the moment of discovering that Santa wasn't real in the car. So it had some type of large scale impact that I don't remember a lot about that time of my life, but I do remember little things, right? But I think that for me is one of the big things, right? In one of the videos I watched, what's his name, Pastor? I watch all of his stuff. I'm drawing a blank. Mike Weiner. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Nope,
he has great videos, but I watch a lot of his stuff, and I'm botching his name here. But he was talking about how our Christian faith is not at all on the same scale as Santa Claus is. As an adult, you see the Santa story and then you see the Christian story. They're not equal at all. There's historical evidence for Christ. There's reasons for Christ. There's backing for Christ. We have personal experience with Christ. That's not the same with Santa, right? As an adult, you look at the two stories and they're not even remotely on the same caliber, But as a kid, we don't view the world in the same way we do as an adult. We don't look for historical citations of things, when we're 8 years old. We don't have, because he used the example of when we come to Christ, we see how the world works, right? We see how, we have draw for moral and ethics, and we see how ingrained it is in Scripture. And a kid doesn't have that. They don't have all these cues that lead to God that as an adult we see, right? That drives us towards Christ in our life. But a kid doesn't have that, right? They have the people in their life, like their parents, the people that can help them learn, help them, experience life and drive them in the right direction. So now you have a kid that's on the surface level, they're going to church, they're, being taught, the true Christmas story of Christ's birth, but now they have this other thing that they're being taught. And while church is physical, the Holy Spirit lives in us, but now we have this flip side of Santa who, what's the experience that they get for Santa? They go sit on his lap. They get real gifts, physical things that they're holding on to, and in a kid's mind, it's real to them. You see the trauma, like with the elf thing, where the elf on the shelf, right? You see those videos of the kids that there's one video where the one kid's holding it, and then if you're holding it, it loses its magic or whatever.
Okay.
So the one kid's holding it, and he doesn't know because he's like 3 and he's got the elf. And then, the other little kid who's like 7 is like having a panic attack because he's like freaking out. Like, you're going to kill the elf's magic, and he's having like a full-fledged, like he's freaking out. That's how much weight the kid's mind that these stories and these lies and deceptions have on an 8-year-old. Things traumatize an 8-year-old that wouldn't even affect an adult, right? Like for us, it's like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. But for an 8-year-old, it lives in them like a real thing. Yeah. And I think the conclusion for me that, let's say you're 10 years old and you find out, okay, Santa is a lie. It's not real. My parents told me, okay, it was to have fun. It was to, build community, good things that came out of it. And you're like, oh, I get that. But now you're looking at it as a 10-year-old. You're not seeing all that. Like, you're seeing, well, Mom, they still got me, they were getting me gifts, but, they pulled the wool over my whole life. I really believe that, and I think it is a reasonable conclusion for a 10-year-old to make, for them to go in their life and be like, well, what else has Mom told me?
Yeah.
And now we have the figure of Christ, which is so inbound with Christmas at that time period because they are happening in the kid's life at the same time. I think it's a reasonable conclusion for a 10-year-old, 8-year-old, 12-year-old, 4-year-old to make that conclusion. Maybe not a reasonable conclusion for an adult to make, but as a 10-year-old, I can definitely see that as a reasonable conclusion to make.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I'm thinking back to the way I grew up, and we did Santa Claus. We did the Tooth Fairy. Which the Tooth Fairy is a funny one because we never told my kids that there was a Tooth Fairy, but they made up the Tooth Fairy. Yeah. Like, we have a little, I guess it's a fairy figurine with like a little pouch that you put the tooth in, and we'd give the kids $1 or whatever for a tooth. And they came up with the Tooth Fairy thing, and we right from the get, we're like, no, it's not the Tooth Fairy. Like, and they fought us on it. They're like, no, there's a Tooth Fairy. We're like,
because they believe it.
Yeah, I'm like, well, but they didn't get it from us. We're like, no, there's actually not. Like, I'm like, no, there's actually not. They're like, you can say that, but we're going to have, they're basically like, okay, Dad, whatever, but we're going to have fun with this. Yeah. So like, you're not going to, I promise you're not going to steal your child's imagination by not telling them that there's a Santa Claus. No. Like they'll do that part on their own. But like as a kid, I don't remember when I realized that there was no Santa. And I guess I've always been enough of a inquisitive or pessimistic kid where I was like, the math don't jive here. Like my folks split when I was really young. So like we got Christmas here and Christmas here. Like
how's this work?
So Santa's delivering presents to both of them, but like Santa's handwriting here looks different than Santa's handwriting here. And like I did that math pretty early and it never bothered me. It never bothered me as a kid. It wasn't like, oh man, you've lied to me. I feel betrayed. And I'm not sure. Maybe I just saw the world a little bit differently because of the way my house was divided up. And like I had great parents. I had, a good childhood. There was no like, oh, everything was so terrible that I didn't even care about Santa Claus. Like, no, Christmases were great. We did good Christmases at Dad's house. We did good Christmases at Mom's house. But I mean, it just, to me, it was never that big of a deal.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe that was because my parents didn't, like, it was a thing. And maybe a couple years we went and did the Santa at the mall thing. Again, that was the 90s. So like that stuff was, we thought that stuff was okay in the 90s to let your small children sit on some random weirdo's lap.
I mean, they still do it. So
I know. Whatever. But, you know, so maybe that's why I'm not as, like, we don't do it, but I'm not hardcore against it. You know, I see all the reasons why we decided to not do that. And that's my stance, of course. But I know I have other friends that do the Santa Claus thing. I'm like, okay, whatever. That's up to you. I'll do my best to tell my kids to not spoil it for your kids.
I tell them the truth.
Then not tell them the truth, like you're not doing.
But I definitely see that. And I think, I don't know what's the norm. Like, is the norm that situation, like where it's kind of told to them?
Well, normal's not necessarily good.
I agree.
You know,
I agree.
We're in,
but
2025 in America, normal's not necessarily good.
But what is the status? Like, how do the majority of people approach Santa? I don't know for sure. Maybe the majority of the people, it is like we kind of play along, but it's not like that serious. It would appear that that's not the case culturally in America. It would appear that they're doing everything they can to have the young child not know that it's not real. I mean, you think of the public education, like it's like you would be the kid if, like, let's say you didn't do Santa and you went to public school. You would be the kid, like, at 6 years old. Everyone else is believing in Santa, and they're writing notes to Santa at school. I feel like we did that at school, but you'd be the kid, and you'd have to hold your tongue. You'd have to whatever, or you would just be that kid, you know?
Kids that know there's no Santa are so hilarious when they're around people that talk about it. Like, so my mom, even though we've told her, like, we don't do Santa, the kids don't do Santa, she'll still act like they're Santa. And she came a couple years ago for Christmas, and she was talking about Santa, and she left, or she went back to her hotel or whatever. And Mavis, who I think at the time she was maybe 7, she looks at me and she's like, does Grandma really still believe in Santa Claus?
Nobody told her the lie.
she was like, is Grandma okay? I'm like, how do I approach this one? I'm like, no. I was like, Grandma knows there's no Santa Claus. It's just fun. It's just fun for her.
I think that is.
Mavis is like, okay.
That's good evidence, though, of how kids think, how kids perceive situations.
Kids are so much sharper than we give them credit for.
Yes, I think so.
Oh, I know so. I have a bunch of them in my house. I know so.
This is them finding out that Santa's not real from a moral standpoint going to jade them towards Christ. I think it's a reasonable conclusion to make. Other people may disagree. Some people may agree. But I do think there's other reasons other than that central one for me, just because the Christian faith is so important for me. But I have a lot of other reasons why. But when you think of the concept of Santa, he brings gifts, right? So now we have a household. Let's say all the little kids believe in Santa. You have 4 children, right? And everybody's believing in Santa. Now you have dad or mom, I guess, going out there, or household as a whole, going out there, working really hard throughout the year to afford, to shop, to do all these things to create a beautiful Christmas where their kids get these gifts. They have this hope of these gifts they're going to get. They get to shop. They get to do all these things that bring joy to the kids, right? And it should be looked at from their children like, okay, mom and dad really sacrificed, really suffered so that we can have these gifts. They worked hard. They put finances into it. They went out and shopped for them. It's mom and dad that put in effort for us, and now we've taken that appreciation that the kid should have for their parents and put it on this mystical figure of Santa. And I just don't see that as a helpful. For me, it would be a harmful thing to the family as a unit, because now they're not seeing the struggle and hardship that the parents are going for them. They're seeing, okay, all these gifts came from Santa and he's magical. So, that's cool, but they're not appropriately putting the weight behind what the gift means in their family structure.
Yeah, and I have issue with just again the American Christmas, which is the only thing that I have reference because I've never been outside the United States, but the way we market Christmas, and it's a buy our crap holiday, and I grew up in households that didn't have a ton of money, and yet we still got a ton of crap for Christmas, and a bunch of that stuff. You play with it as a kid for 2 days or a week, and then it sits. And as a parent and knowing other parents, the stress involved with finding the right presents for not just your family, but other family members and making sure that you get all these things. Like, why do we do that? Why is it so important that you have a tree with a ton of crap under it? And none of it's, or very little of it, is truly meaningful, especially nowadays. You go on Amazon for 5 minutes, you've got everything ordered for everybody. There's no meaning there. It's just, it's unnecessary stress on the whole family, in my opinion.
See, I completely agree. I think, I do. I think it's been commercialized, and I think the Santa figurehead of that, and maybe I'm just taking it way too far, but I think the Santa figurehead has elevated that to a disproportionate degree because, obviously the people that are selling the things have utilized him as a marketing tool.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Santa's just an easy marketing tool. But at this point, we do it to ourselves.
Absolutely. But the weight that you're putting behind it, all those stressors and things, like it just fortifies my position of, when the kid's asking for gifts, I mean, you have much more firsthand experience. If they've seen dad, like let's say you're living in a family and dad got laid off or whatever, and, he's trying to find a job and stuff like that. An 8-year-old's going to experience that. He's going to have to be told that because dad's at home now. Like he's going to be told that. That's a reality for him. He's going to have to cut costs on things. Like that's going to be something that he knows about in his life. And most 8-year-olds, are going to be like, okay, I get it. I'm not going to be a little, entitled, child and be like, I need all the great things.
Entitled little shit.
Yeah, really
you
though.
Wanted to say it,
they're going to, maybe some kids, but most kids are going to be conscious of that and be like, okay, mom and dad are cutting corners because dad got laid off. He's trying to find a new job. I'm going to try to, which as humans, that's him learning the proper moral, ethical things to do. Mm-hmm. If he thinks that all the gifts are coming from Santa, now dad's lost his job and I'm asking for all these things. And each year it's building upon itself because it doesn't matter if we're poor or rich or whatever, Santa's bringing the gifts, and the kid at school that's dad's a doctor, he gets really great gifts. So is Santa just discriminate against us? I think there's a lot there. That's my point. I think there's a lot there that people don't think about when they're formulating this lie of Santa in their child's life. Yeah. Maybe I'm taking it over top of what it should be, but there's more there than I think it's a bigger impact than people are giving it weight that they should.
You're very passionate about Santa.
I am. I mean, what other thing in a kid's life in the United States, I don't know what happens in other, world communities that are different than, what we think of as an American community, but there's nothing else like it.
Yeah.
There's nothing. No, there's no other figure like the fair. I think I wouldn't do that either. I think the same principles apply. I just don't think it's the same way. Like the what'd you say? Tooth fairy, stuff like
Easter
that.
Bunny,
It's the same principle.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess Easter Bunny worse because it's Easter, but the Tooth Fairy, it's not attached to any religious holidays or anything for us. But I think they're not the same as there's nothing to the level that we have Santa. Easter Bunny, I guess people do bring them, but as a kid, the Easter Bunny's giant. He doesn't. I feel like it's easier for a kid to draw the conclusion that I think those are harmful too. But I think there's nothing truly like Santa that the kid likely, if you're gonna go down that direction, there's nothing like that in the kid's life that he's gonna truly believe and be deceived actively 8-9 years of his life, and then all of a sudden with one instant, which is going to be a harmful interaction. It's either going to be like mine.
It's probably not going to be on purpose.
No, or a kid at school telling them, and they're going to be confused. Hopefully they go home and I'm like, are you telling me Santa's not real? Mom, I'm trying to get the truth. But in my opinion, most kids are probably not going to do that. They're probably just going to use the internet or and then if they use the internet, don't tell, there's just so much there that.
And kids are sharp nowadays. They're gonna play that to their advantage. Like, I'm gonna pretend I still believe in Santa Claus. That way I still get them Santa presents.
Yeah. Our cousin told us that, me and Deanna one time, like we were pretty sure that was his position. And I think the parents, his parents knew that like he didn't believe anymore. And they're kind of, maybe in his little, 9-10-year-old mind was like, I'm pulling one over my parents. And they're like, yeah, okay, you're not. Yeah. But I just think there's nothing like that in a kid's life. That's like, and you could make, like you said, like she thought she was an otter or wanted to be an otter, she plays fantasy. That stuff doesn't continue for 8 or 9 years. And if it did,
well, nowadays it does. Now they'll give you a litter box in school if you think you're a cat. Right?
And my point is being proven. I'm serious though. I'm serious.
Yeah.
Think about it. I mean, if like, let's say the otter thing, or like, I'm a fairy or whatever it is, if that continued for multiple, what? The fairy one got you?
Yeah. I'm okay.
But like that type of stuff, like if that continued, right, for multiple years, as a parent, like you have a duty and responsibility, like, okay, this has gone too far. You're not an otter. You're not a fairy.
I hope not.
It's true. Well, people do become fairies, I guess. You're not, Harry Potter. You're not a witch. You're not this, if your kid thought that they were a witch, like Harry Potter witch, not like Salem type witch type thing. If they thought they were like a Harry Potter witch, most reasonable parents, like after 6 months, would be like, look, okay, here's the deal. Yeah. You're not actually a witch.
Yeah. Make my cold coffee hot.
Yeah.
Nope. Sorry. All right.
They would cut it off because like, it's not healthy to have a bended view of reality.
Well, and there's a difference. There is a difference between, like my kid with the imaginary friend. Like, I can go along with that without going, oh no, you actually do. Mm-hmm. If they could talk about their imaginary friend, and I'm not necessarily gonna go, you don't actually have an imaginary friend, because they know they don't actually have an imaginary friend. They're using their imagination. That's why it's called an imaginary friend. That's fine. Like that's good. That's healthy. That's normal. Mm-hmm. That's not me going, you actually have an imaginary friend. Mm-hmm. You may not realize it, but you have an imaginary friend. Okay, well, now we're like...
I mean, Santa's an imaginary friend.
Santa's kind of an imaginary friend.
I know your point, though. I'm not trying to, downgrade your point.
No, I'm just playing devil's advocate for partially to fluster you and, for the sake of...
I've had a lot of arguments with people about this topic, so I'm well prepared.
You're ready. I like so many things, it comes down to the heart of what you're doing, like, and what your household stands for. Is if you're a modern household and you carry the Christian name in name only, and you're not practicing your faith anyways, and this is how you do it, then maybe we're not talking to you. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that, I'm not going to get in a huge argument with anybody over whether or not you should do Santa in your house. Like, we got way bigger fish to fry. But if you are somebody who's serious in your faith and you're serious about raising your children in the faith, whether Santa is a good thing or a bad thing or an in-between thing, it shouldn't be a priority at all. Mm-hmm. Because the priority, especially around Christmas, is the birth of Jesus. Now, was Jesus actually born on December 25th? No, probably not. But that's not the point. Mm-hmm. The point is that day was chosen to celebrate his birth. And then the market was like, oh man, we can capitalize on this. Hey, I'm pro-capitalism. Capitalism is good. Until capitalism turns into idolatry. This is kind of in the realm of idolatry. Yeah. So, again, bring myself back. If your focus is to raise a family that's dedicated to Christ, and a marriage that's dedicated to Christ, and kids that grow up watching you and learning how to follow down this very difficult path of navigating the Christian life. And it is difficult because oh my gosh, I'm not supposed to do Santa Claus. And like, you're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to do that. Is this right? Is that wrong? The point is not to get it perfect. The point is to fight to stay on the path the best you can and to always be pointed true north. So I think, like you said, it's a potential obstacle that you're putting in your kid's way. Is it definitely going to be? No. Could it maybe be? Yeah. Is it something that the world created to take a bunch of your money? Yeah, definitely. Like, for sure. Like, it's the whole St. Nicholas story of blah, blah, blah. That's okay. Yes, that was a real thing, I guess. I don't know all the history of that. It doesn't matter. That's not what Santa is today. Santa today is a fat dude in a red suit with a fake beard that wants to convince you to buy more Mattel toys for your kid. Like, that's what it is.
And I wanted to be clear that you can be a Christian, you can have a sound Christian household and still do the Santa lie. And I'm going to keep saying Santa lie, even though, whatever. But you can. I want, my position is that it's very harmful to children. And I want people to maybe think about it more than they do. That's my position. And those are my reasons. I did a little research on the history of Santa before we did the podcast. And, a lot of the history of Santa is like up in the air, like how it transformed into what it did. I can link some of the different YouTube videos that, and people I listen to, of trying to get some background. But I mean, St. Nicholas was real. He existed. If I'm remembering correctly, he lived like late 200s to 300s, and he inherited a bunch of money as a kid. And then he was raised by, I guess, his uncle, who was a bishop, I want to say. So he had this large sum of money and then was left with it and, grew up in I would assume, a Catholic community. And I guess back then, if you had daughters, you could not, they wouldn't really marry unless you had a dowry to go with them. So if you were poor, I guess it was common that your daughters would just either go into some form of slavery, or whether it was sex slavery, or I gotta mute that because YouTube's gonna hit that, but or some type of slavery or some type of not good outcome. So I guess there was a man that was in their community or church or whatever it was, and St. Nicholas was like, I can help them because his daughters, these beautiful daughters that are gonna go into this life that I don't want them to go into. So he dropped gold down the chimney, I think is what it was, or left it in their living room or whatever at night because he didn't want them to know that it was him. And there was, I think it was 3 daughters. The first daughter ended up getting married off because they had the money to have a dowry, and then he continued to do it. And I guess he was the third one or second one, he was discovered. The guy discovered it, and that became tradition, I guess, I want to say it was there was a lot of German history behind it. And like one of the stories was like, it transformed into, it basically became gift giving in the communities, right? And they would gift give around that time because I think it was December 6th. Don't quote me on that, was when he died. And when they die, I think they call them feast days, and they celebrate that person on the day of their death. So that became, that time frame became a thing to associate with St. Nicholas. But I thought it was interesting because the community as a whole adopted the giving atmosphere. So it wasn't just St. Nicholas going around the community giving to the needy. It became like everybody, they jumped on board. They began giving with him. So there was like this like kind of almost like, well, man, St. Nicholas is really getting around because like all the poor people are getting help and getting gifts. And it became this kind of bigger than life type thing. He was this figure, and he was. And then he continued on to live that type of lifestyle. And I want to say that he gave away like all of his wealth in his lifetime and became like a monk, a bishop, and basically lived like a real sound Christian life. And I think whether he did this or not is up for debate, but I think it's pretty established that he was at the Council of Nicaea, and there was a heretic, I can't remember his name, that was there teaching heresy, and they were trying to say that, you're wrong. And apparently St. Nicholas got up and hit him. So that was the real St. Nicholas. I think that's a story that's up for debate on whether he actually smacked him or whatnot. But, he was a passionate sound Christian figure in history that was real and it's documented, and that's who he was. And I think the spirit of that continued on, and there was books written in like the late 1800s into the 1900s that kind of transformed into this Santa figure, and then obviously marketing and things monopolized Santa.
Yeah.
And I think the Coca-Cola ad is really what gave us the figure of Santa that we see now with the boots and the red suit and stuff. Yeah. And now they've, run with it, but.
See, I'm so uncultured that I kind of knew about 10% of the St. Nicholas story, but that's about it.
And that's a toned down version. It's all out there if people research it. That's from what I gathered, and you do it with me, but it's hard to try to learn something and then come on here and speak it accurately. So destroy me in the comments so that we can actively get the accurate depiction of the history of it. But
we claim to know our own opinion and nothing more.
It is hard though sometimes to then voice your opinion. Yeah. You have it in your head, but sometimes it's hard to get out accurately. But I think the spirit of who he is, and I think like you said, like how do you navigate that with a family? I don't think we have to do away with Santa. I think we have to have an accurate look at it, and all the good that Saint Nicholas did, and all the things that we can pull from that. I mean, they're real; they exist. I think you can dive down a huge, healthy rabbit hole with that. Even if it's just taking your kids out and doing charitable things around the holidays, and you want to celebrate Saint Nicholas and who he was and what he did, doing those things because that's what he did. I think there needs to be a separation and understanding for kids of Santa Claus was a real person. This is not who he was. This is some type of creation or whatever that is trying to sell you more stuff, which I guess people might not think that, but, and dive into the wholesome side of it and why we do this and why we give gifts on Christmas. And Wesley Huff has a ton of content about like the whole Christmas is pagan thing, which from my understanding, it wasn't as much that we adopted the pagan holiday. It was more that the
Christians adopted the
Christians were celebrating the birth of Christ, and the pagans tried to manipulate their holidays to try to shut down the Christian celebrations that they were having.
Well, they've been trying to shut down Christianity for the last 2,000 years.
Yeah. So. That was the little bit of St. Nicholas history that I know that I tried. I mean, I didn't know. I tried to do a little research, so I'd have that, but.
Yeah. I don't know. That's, again, I'm not nearly as passionate about it as you are. I agree that I don't think we're doing it right societally. And maybe that would be a relatively simple answer. Like, hey, this guy that we used to call Santa Claus is a representation of this guy, Saint Nick. This was his actual story. Like, Santa Claus is not actually a fat guy that comes down our chimney and puts crap under our trees, but we give you these things to honor what he did, and he did it to honor, the birth of Christ. He was doing it to show his love of God and represent, the sacrifice and the gifts that he gives us.
Mm-hmm. And it's such a beautiful thing too, because even when you look at like the Romans, I'm gonna misquote what that holiday was, but it's the winter solstice, I think, and it's the shortest day of the year, right? So the Romans thought that marked the shortest day of the year. So then now the sun is conquering the darkness, right? As they move into the spring, now days get longer and longer, and they have the harvest and all.
They just spelled sun wrong.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did.
S-O-N,
but
not
just
S-U-N.
like, when you look at the bigger picture of it all, it's like, all the different symbolic things that go along with Christmas, the lights and things, and how we can still have that like joyful experience like that. I guess I don't want to say Hallmark experience, but those type of
that's literally the problem.
Yeah, that's true. But those type of cultural things that bring us joy, like, it's depending on where you live, it's going to be colder that time of year. It's going to be slower typically that time of year, work, holidays. We can pour that into what Christmas really means and make it hit heavier and more wholesomely towards the reason on why we should be celebrating, which is Christ's birth and what, God has done, humbling himself into a human, for us. That's why we're celebrating. And all those things should point to him, not a guy in a big red suit. And they can point to him, I know people tie the Magi bringing gifts as a reason we give gifts. And maybe that's why St. Nicholas, maybe that's why it morphed. I don't know. But there's so much there that we can tie into Christ, right? And we can teach the story of Christ's birth and continue on to the gospel right from there and why it means so much and why we're so joyful that time of year, which always was weird to me because there's Easter, which I get it. Christ was crucified, but he rose again. So like it's sad, but it's joyful. You know, that's always a weird one for me. But Christmas, it's like we can just, God came down and made himself a human for us, right?
Yeah, right.
And we can live in that joy. We can live in that community of warmth and safety that gives us as Christians, and celebrate that and have lights and have a Christmas tree. It just has to be positioned correctly. And I think all those things and traditions that we do that point towards like the Hallmark Christmas can point our children towards Christ and further their faith, and know that this time of year we do all this stuff because God came down and made himself a man for us,
I'm really bad at Christmas. All the holidays. I don't
You don't seem like much
no
of a holiday
lights on
guy.
the house. No, I'm really bad at that stuff. And we do Christmas in our house, obviously.
Yeah.
We have a tree. Our tree's like 3 feet tall. It's actually like half a tree. It's one of the manufactured trees. It was so Charlie Brown that Jerry Lynn moved some of the branches around to the front and then sticks it up against a wall so that it kind of looks like a full tree.
Yeah.
But the kids have fun with it because they make a bunch of the decorations, and we hang Happy Birthday Jesus on the wall
There you
instead
go.
of Merry Christmas. And part of it for me is, unfortunately, one of the downsides to like my first decade of being a business owner was I just worked so much. Like I don't have time to think about these things, which is not correct. It was not good, but so it's hard for me to get like in the spirit of Christmas or whatever, because I'm like, okay, it's another day.
Yeah. And I think, does everyone have to go to the extreme right now? And some people, like you said, like that's a reality. You just couldn't, that, season of life or whatever it was, where you're busy, or like in foreign countries, people live day to day, like life day to day, like they could be dead tomorrow. So obviously you're probably not going to be thinking, decorate a Christmas tree. But I think like we have the season, Advent season, and we're like preparing our hearts, and we're really humbling ourselves and understanding why Christmas exists, and I think that spirit, we can work towards that and nurture an environment that, breeds and teaches children of really why this is so meaningful. Like we sing Christmas songs that are Christmas specific, to fill our hearts, to fill ourselves with joy for a reason. And that reason is Christ and, the thankfulness of his birth. Like even like, but like that's like even the happy birthday Jesus, like that's like a ironic little funny thing, but like that's teaching your kids of why.
Oh no, we mean it. Like,
Yeah. But no, I'm not saying you're doing it that way, but like it's something that you put up, and that's a tradition that y'all have
right.
that's meaningful, and they're going to have that, they're going to, that's them learning why we're celebrating this. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're kind of in the season of starting new traditions because, for so many years, and this is part of just becoming a parent and, moving into your own family, so to speak. We grew up, and even when Jerry Lynn and I got together when we were younger, every Christmas Eve we would go to her dad's family for Christmas Eve. And on sometimes the day after Christmas we would go to my mom's parents for Christmas there. And those things have ceased as for one, it was harder to get there. It got harder and harder to get there as we had more kids and moved away. And we were already away, but as we had more kids, it got harder to get to Ohio to do that. And then as family members pass away, her dad passed away, her grandmother passed away, both of my mom's parents have passed away. So we don't do those things for Christmas anymore. So a lot of our holidays, we're trying to learn and make what our own traditions are and will be for hopefully a long time. But, and that's a tricky thing.
It's a tricky thing, and I think that's a really powerful and joyful thing that you can look forward to. You have a big family, and like, not to say that you can't have traditions in small families, but you have a big family and you have a lot of girls that down the road hopefully will be married and have lots of kids, right? So you'll have 20 years, 30 years from now, like your family has the potential to be a really big family.
Right.
So the traditions that you're building now, think of the impact that they may have at the Christmas dinner table 30 years from now.
Yeah.
That hopefully you and Jerry Lynn are sitting there with gray hair teaching everybody about Christ, and singing out in joy and doing these little things that because we do the things to bring us together and to have, fellowship together, and they're all pointing towards Christ this time of year, especially, right? And there's so much that you can do around Christmas. I mean, like, it's almost a shame nowadays because, like, our leisure that we have air conditioning, we have lights, things like that. But back in the day, they didn't have that. So, like, this was a real time of rest. It was a time of slow. It was a time of peace that, you reflected on things because you weren't out there working like you were because you had shorter days. If you were in the farming community, you weren't farming. If you were in a cold climate, you really couldn't go out and work. I mean, I know because where you're from, you weren't digging holes or doing a lot of construction.
Oh, no, we
in December
were. It just
and February.
sucked more.
Yeah, exactly.
We were
but
just-
you were because you could. You weren't doing that in 1730.
No, probably not. Probably not. It's funny. We're talking about Santa Claus. One of the big things that we did, or the Jerry Lynn's family did every year for the last forever, is her uncle. Well, I guess as long as I was around, it was her Uncle George, who he's passed away since too. Which he would dress up as Santa Claus, and all of the kids would sit on Santa's knee, and that was a huge part of it. And honestly, I mean, it was fantastic. It was a ton of fun.
Yeah, and it is.
And that family, they're a big Catholic family, but Christ was the center of that Christmas Eve party every year. They did a good job of that. So, like, that was a little piece of it. But the main focus was Christ.
It's part of the bigger picture, and I think it should be. And I hope that we can have Santa involved. Like, that exact thing can happen, and the kids can still, like, have that same experience. I don't think it lessens the experience them to know that that's Uncle George or whatever. Like, they still know the reason.
Yeah,
and
well, and all my kids did know. All my kids knew. They didn't necessarily know this. Well, yeah, I'm sure they figured out it was George because he's George and he's unmistakable.
Probably every kid.
Someday
there knew
I
it
will
was
tell
George.
George stories because George stories are awesome. But and they loved it. They knew that it wasn't a real Santa Claus. At least my kids did, and they still loved it
because they're kids, and that the stuff that you do around the holidays, like, for kids, means a lot. I see all those Instagram reels, and it's like when you grow up and you realize, like, your mom was the Christmas joy that you felt. The nostalgia was really just mom, but that, like, really is true. Like, if a lot of those nostalgic things that we experience, like that for you is like a nostalgic experience, even as an adult, right?
Yeah.
For your kids, it probably really is, right? That was created by the adults that were like, okay, we're gonna think about what traditions we're gonna do. There's gonna be intention behind what we're doing, and I think that is important. And I think there's a big play in kind of like our world of, like, only things that are essential and only things that are, I think the beauty side of it and, like, kind of gets lost, I guess, the deeper side sometimes. And I think maybe that's more of an American thing of, like, getting it done, only the essentials, you get, I think maybe that you lose a little bit of that, like, in our culture, that hopefully maybe we can revive as years go on. But yeah, that's my position on Santa's lie.
So, in conclusion, Drew hates Christmas.
I hate Santa. I don't even hate Santa. I can't say that because I St. Nicholas was great, and if he's Santa, then absolutely.
Right. So Drew hates Christmas, but yeah, do Santa, don't do Santa. This is our opinion on it. I don't. Drew doesn't. Just make sure that Christmas is centered around the birth of Christ. That's what it's all about. It's the greatest gift ever given to mankind is the birth of Jesus and his death and resurrection to pay for our sins. If that's the focus on your Christmas and you manage to work Santa in around that, then hey, good on you. But please make sure that the center of your Christmas is Christ.
Yeah, absolutely. And my thing is just do Santa right. Just, if you're in a Christian community or family, like, be more thoughtful about the cultural adoption of certain traditions, have more intention behind what you're doing. And like you said, point towards the greatest story ever told, which is the birth of Christ. We look towards the gospel and the things that happened, and, we celebrate Christmas and his birth, and it's in the Gospels and it's in Scripture. But, this is a time that we can really lean in, to a joyful time, to a humbling time, to a thankful time. It's right after Thanksgiving here in the United States. And, the amazing thing that that God came down and, became human for us, I mean, many years passed till he, did the deed, that kind of lessened it, I guess. But what does Christmas mean in our hearts and in our culture? That is the biggest thing for me. And we need to protect what it means because they're trying to take it away. And I think they're going to do it more subtly than we think. And we need to live with intention to put Christ first in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Stop listening to Mariah Carey Christmas music. What's your favorite Christmas song? And then we'll shut it down.
Hold on a second. I don't know names of songs, but
how's it go? Sing it first.
Immanuel. What's it? Oh come! I just need my phone. I got that tool.
Oh come, Immanuel.
Yeah, probably that. I think it's probably my favorite Christmas song.
Oh, Holy Night.
There you go.
That's where it's at.
Yeah.
On that, this has been Iron and Grace.
Over and out.